Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullah wa barakatuh. I was once talking to a farmer who had very large acreage in a city called Izmir in Turkey. And he said to me, he said, a farm is like having a factory without a roof. And it's like that. You are very dependent on what goes on with the weather. You're very dependent on rain, and you're very dependent on lack of rain, on sunshine, and on lack of sunshine. And you have to know when the appropriate time is to plant things, when the appropriate time is to harvest, and how to take care of your crops. Plants that produce produce for farming take time to germinate. They don't germinate immediately. Weeds, on the other hand, germinate within a couple of days. The seeds of a weed are very small, and a little bit of moisture is enough for a weed to germinate and grow. So when, let's say, you plant rice or any crop, the first thing that's going to sprout is weeds. And a farmer has to be very diligent in taking the weeds out of the ground, because the weeds will suppress the growth of his crop. It keeps them from growing. It takes up their space. It eats their nutrients. And if the farmer isn't vigilant in weeding the areas that he's plowed, he will have a reduced crop. No matter how well you plow the field, you still have to take care of the weeds. And weeds don't stop. Weeds are relentless. They continue to grow. They continue to come up. And as often as you get rid of them, more of them come up. Ignorance is like that. Ignorance grows on the surface of man. It comes from the mind, and it takes up all of man's time and all of man's nourishment. Ignorance is easy to become involved with, but to get to wisdom is difficult and takes great effort. One of the largest problems of ignorance is arrogance. Arrogance believes that it knows everything. Arrogance is the tool of the autocrat. Arrogance is the tool of the narcissist. Arrogance is the tool of the one who is power hungry. Arrogance is the tool of those who are very, very self-centered. Arrogance is one of the fulcrums of ignorance. There were a group of animals in the forest, and there was a hole in the forest, and there was a tiger, and there was a lion, and there was a rat, and there was a bear, and there was a cat, and there were some other animals. And they were trying to figure out how deep the hole was that was in the forest. And the lion went up to the hole and stuck its tail into it. And he said, "The hole is as deep as my tail." The tiger went over to it and stuck his tail into it and said, "The hole is as deep as my tail." The small cat went into it, and he said, the hole's as deep as my tail. The rat went into it, and he said, no, no, you're all wrong. The hole is as deep as my tail. And they all began to argue and scream at each other. And finally, they resorted to eating each other. But this is what happens. Arrogance and ignorance try to measure divinity through ignorance. And it can't be done. Ignorance will never understand divinity. Ignorance will never understand divinity. Ignorance will never cross over into divinity. Ignorance is like trying to plant seeds in rocky soil where there's no dirt. It won't take, and nothing can grow there. If you plant seeds on rocks, the water or the rain will just wash it away. Man needs to understand that the soil has to be appropriate for wisdom to grow. And arrogance makes man an inappropriate place for wisdom to grow. When man is overwhelmed by arrogance, there's no room for truth. There's only room for the self-centered narcissism of the arrogant one. Everything that is his opinion is right, and any other opinion has no bearing. And in order for wisdom to be able to grow, man has to do away with his ignorance. In the same way as the farmer has to understand the nature of weeds and how to get rid of weeds, man has to understand the nature of ignorance and how to get rid of ignorance. An ignorant man will collect everything thinking it has value. If you've ever been into the home of a hoarder, it's quite an astonishing experience. I've been in a house where people collected newspapers and everything else that came in their possession and never threw a thing away. So in this house, the newspapers were piled so high, there were like little corridors between the newspapers that you had to go around in order to get to places. And this happened during an estate that I was taking care of. We had to visit the house in order to see what was there. Ignorance will give importance to the most unimportant things. Ignorance can't tell the difference between gold and things that are dross. Copper or brass is easily available. Gold is rare. And if you don't know the difference, you treat everything like gold. And you can't treat everything like gold. Just because it glitters in your mind doesn't make it gold. Gold has specific properties. Gold will never tarnish because it can't be attacked by oxygen in the way other metals can be attacked by oxygen. So a gold pot needs no adornment. It doesn't need to be polished. Yet everything else needs to be polished. Vigilance has to be constant. Patience has to be constant. Our interaction with ignorance has to be constant. And the ignorance that we have to be in constant vigilance about is not other people's ignorance. It's our own ignorance. We have to be constantly vigilant about the state of our own ignorance. We have to be constantly vigilant about what it is that we react to and how it is that we react and why it is that we react. Doubt, for instance, is ignorance. When we have doubt about our faith, that is a stepping stone to ignorance. It loses our faith. It loses our ability to comprehend truth because we don't believe in it. Doubt is a lack of belief. Doubt is a lack of being sure. And when you're not sure, then you can go off and do whatever you want because you lost your faith. We have to establish within us faith and the ability to comprehend the difference between truth and falsehood. Truth is a great treasure, and truth is the growth of wisdom within us. If we plant seeds, the end result of planting these seeds is to grow crops. Well, we have to plant the seed of wisdom within us. And that seed of wisdom has to be watered. And what waters a seed of wisdom that's planted within us? Well, men of wisdom water that seed. We need to be in contact with men of wisdom in order for that seed of wisdom to be nourished. It's through contact with wisdom that our wisdom grows. It's through contact with men who have wisdom that the wisdom within us grows. Wisdom is grown through contact with the wise. You're not going to find wisdom in books. You're not going to find wisdom walking around the streets. You're going to find wisdom when you find a wise man. And then when you find that, you have to stay close to it, because this is the path to your salvation. This is the path to coming to know the truth. And if you can find the truth, this is enough to last you for eternity. A tree is different than most plants. If you plant corn, if you plant vegetables, you have to water vegetables. And when you plant a tree, you also have to water the tree in its beginning stages. But as the tree grows, it puts forth a root. And this root will find over time water for itself when it gets large enough. And when that root of the tree finds water itself underground, you no longer have to water it. It takes care of itself. It finds its own water and supplies itself with its own water. It's like that with wisdom. Wisdom has to be watered, and it's watered by a wise man. And what the wise man helps us do is he helps us give up the world and turn our attention towards truth. And as we give up the world and turn our attention to truth, our attachment to illusion and to worldly things becomes less and less, and our attachment to truth becomes stronger and stronger. And as our attachment to truth grows, we create a root, we create a connection to divinity. When that connection to divinity is created, then the honey of God's grace flows through to us. And if we can enter into that state, then we have created for ourselves a pathway to eternity, a pathway to eternal life. So we spend our life, our formative years, communing with the dunya, communing with earth, air, fire, water, and ether, all of the elemental things that are around us. We spend our time working with those things and trying to gain our satisfaction from those things. But then as we become older, we begin to realize that contentment can't be found in those places. So we begin to look in other places for contentment. And if we're fortunate, we run into somebody who understands where contentment can be found. And what he explains to us is that the elements have arrogance, all of them. Earth is arrogant, water is arrogant, air is arrogant, ether is arrogant, fire is arrogant, but they are not content. Contentment is only found through God's qualities. So if we're truly going to find contentment, we have to be able to make a distinction between that which is of the world and that which is of the divinity, that which is of God. And what we should be able to recognize is that that which is of the world is elemental. It has form. It is made up of elements. That which is divine is not elemental. These are qualities that don't have an elemental nature to them. They don't have earth, air, fire, water, or ether in them. They're more like light. They're more transparent. They are without elemental weight. Yet they are more weighty than anything that is elemental. They are more important than anything that is elemental. And we have to learn how to garner our strength from that which is non-elemental. We have to learn to gain our strength from that which is not elemental. Love can't be measured, it can't be weighed, yet its power is overwhelming. Mercy can't be measured and can't be weighed, yet its power is overwhelming. God's qualities can't be measured and can't be weighed, yet Allah rules all of the 18,000 universes through these qualities. He doesn't rule through the elements. He rules through his gracious qualities. He rules through his divine names. He rules through mercy and compassion. His name is mercy and compassion. Now, there comes a time in our life as we begin to pull arrogance from ourselves that we begin to understand there are things we must surrender from our being. There are things we have to hold on to in our being, and there is something that we have to surrender to. And we have to ask ourselves, what are these things? What is it that we need to surrender? What is it that we need to surrender to? What is it that we have to give up? What is it that we have to hold on to? What is it that we have to come to know? And what is it that we have to leave behind? What is ignorance and what is truth? What is illusion and what is a reality? And what is the difference? If we have the grace to encounter a man of wisdom, we find that their interest in things in the world are limited. We find that their interest in the elemental things are limited. They have no need for wealth. They have no need for gold. They have no need for women. They have no need for the things of the world. These have long since passed their interest. These have long since been given up by them, and they have been replaced with the true treasure within this world. And we have to find out what this true treasure is. We have within us, each of us, a mind, and the mind is grounded in the elements, and the mind works with the elements, and the mind lives within the elements, and the mind exalts the elements. It makes them as if they were important and as if they had meaning for us. The heart is the repository for wisdom. It's where wisdom blossoms. The heart is the repository where Allah can reside. And if we can blossom into the qualities of Allah in our heart, then God can find a home within us. So what is it that we need to concentrate on? What is it that we need to bring into our being? And what is it that we need to let go of? When we think about these things, lots of them become self-evident. Do we give up illusion, or do we give up our connection to divinity? Do we give up mercy and compassion, or do we give up arrogance? Do we give up those things that keep us in a state of separation from God and in a state of separation from our fellow man? Or do we accept those things because somehow we have concluded that it's more important for ourselves to be powerful than to understand unity? Because we've concluded that arrogance seems to sustain us and give us a feeling of power. And this feeling of power is enough to satisfy us. Well, the truth is that power does not belong to us. Power only belongs to Allah. And if we claim that we control power through our arrogance, we are heading towards a conclusion that is going to be grief and sorrow. We have to analyze everything that we do. We have to look closely at everything that we do and why we do it. If we don't do that, then we are acting without thought and without reason. We must have reason for that which we do. And we have to understand the nature of why we do things. Are we doing things to make this body more important, or are we doing things to understand our Creator? Are we doing things to conquer the world, or are we doing things to get closer to God? Are we doing things to become more powerful in the world, or are we doing things to enter into a state of unity with all existence, where our arrogance is gone, where our self-motive is gone, and where we understand the unity of all creation, where we understand the unity of all beings, and we understand how we are connected to all beings. There's a story of a man who was on a long journey, and he had become ill on the journey, and he was in India, and he was a high caste Brahmin, and he had fallen unconscious in the street, and a low caste untouchable picked him up and slowly gave him water in order to revive him, and then carried him to his home. And while he was coming back into consciousness, he began to praise this man and to thank this man and to be grateful for what this man had done for him. And as he regained more and more consciousness and grew more and more aware of where he was and who this man was, as they got to his house, he finally was back to himself, and he saw this man was of a low caste, and he said, "Wait here. I will get you some water." And he walked into the house, and he said, "There was a man out there who helped me, but he's a low caste man, so don't use any dishes. Use a coconut shell and give him some water." He returned from his state of weakness to a state of arrogance, and his whole life passed before him, and he saw himself in unity. And then as his arrogance returned, he saw himself as separate. When we are weak, we see ourselves in unity. When we think we are strong, we see ourselves in arrogance. And that's why our teacher would repeat over and over and over, he is the smallest of creatures in this existence. He is the smallest and most discarded of creatures. And he called himself an ant-man to describe how small he was. And we, all of us, in order to understand truth, have to become small. There was once a man who sat before my teacher and asked the teacher to tell him about himself. And Bawa looked at him, and he saw there was danger there, because to teach wisdom to ignorance can be very dangerous for you. And he said to him, "I could tell you about yourself, but then I would have to spend the rest of my life protecting myself from you. But that doesn't make me any better than you are." And even in that situation, Bawa still proclaimed the unity of existence between himself and the rest of humanity. Are we capable of seeing that unity between ourselves and the rest of existence? Or do we have to separate ourselves to give ourselves a certain amount of power so that we are comfortable in our relationships with others? Are we capable of being in relationships with others where we consider them equals? Or do we have to constantly be superior over others? We have to understand this. We have to understand that when it comes to our relationship with God, God is beyond our comprehension. God is beyond our knowing. God is very far beyond us, although he is also as close to us as our jugular vein. But to make him truly close to us, to make him truly within us and us within him, we have to give up everything that separates ourselves from him. We have to give up everything within us that is different from him. So what is it that we need to surrender? We need to surrender that which is not God's qualities. We have to give up all that is not God's qualities. Allah went through a meditation where he gave up everything that wasn't divine within him. And from that, he created the universes. But divinity was kept within him. And he created man. And man was created differently than all the other creations. Man was created in a way that Allah shared his divinity with man. He said to man, I have created you in my image, yet I have no form. So what is it that I have given to you that I haven't given to anybody else? What I've given to you is the ability to take on my qualities. And as man surrenders all that isn't godly within him, man simultaneously surrenders to God. Because the act of surrendering what isn't God's is also the act of surrendering to God. It's through giving up what isn't God that we surrender to God. From taking ourselves out of the place of illusion and entering into the place of truth, we enter into reality. And when we enter into reality, we enter into the light. And when we enter into the light, then we have a totally different way of seeing things than if we see things from the point of view of the world and the point of view of illusion. Illusion has a point of view and light has a point of view. The points, the references are entirely different. Wisdom has a point of view of the light. Ignorance has the point of view of illusion. We need to understand the difference. Illusion is full of self-motive. Illusion is full of arrogance. Illusion is full of hatred. Illusion is full of separation. Reality is full of unity. Reality is full of compassion. Reality has let go of arrogance. Reality understands truth. Reality is connected to divinity. And when that connection with divinity happens, when that connection to divinity occurs, then we enter into the realm of truth. And that truth is enough to sustain us for all eternity. But the things that are illusory dissipate, disappear, and go away and lead us towards hell. Inside of us, there is heaven and there is hell. We must block the entranceway to hell. And how do we block the entranceway to hell? By doing away with our arrogance, by doing away with our separation. This is the doorway to hell. But if arrogance is closed, if hatred is closed, if illusion is closed, if self-motive is done away with, then the doorways to hell are closed and the doorways to heaven become open. We need to understand this. We need to understand what it is that needs to be surrendered, what it is that needs to be surrendered to. We need to understand what we are capable of becoming. And this is what the Sheikh does for us. He shows us what it's like to act from divine attributes. He shows us what it's like to be in a constant state of compassion. He shows us what it's like to see no differences among men. He shows us what it's like to see no differences in religions, to see no differences in color, to see no differences in languages, to see no differences in nationalities, to see beneath all of the things that live on the surface, like weeds. Weeds live on the surface. The things that give us sustenance take a long time to germinate and mature. So we can choose. Do we choose to live on the surface of things? Do we choose to take that which is easy, or do we go for that which is difficult? Do we try to begin to understand what it's like to give up all of the things that we've been brought up with and all of the things that we've been told were true since we were little, because they weren't true? We were told religions separate us. We were told colors separate us. We have things now like identity politics, which means that you relate to your color and that becomes your politics and your point of view for the world. You relate to your race and that becomes your point of view towards the world. The world is trying to separate us from each other, and they do it in the name of truth and in the name of equality. They don't understand that what they're doing is the antithesis of equality, the antithesis of unity, the antithesis of reality. We need to begin to understand what's true and what's false. What are the lies that will lead us to hell? And what is the truth that will block the door to hell? We have to begin to know all of this. We have to analyze all of this, and we have to apply it to our lives. Who is going to care for us besides ourselves? Who is going to take us to truth besides ourselves? The Sheikh will water you, and the Sheikh will give you enough so that you can plant your own root. But like the tree, you have to plant the root that is connected to divinity and then draw from that source. The Sheikh is the interim step to take you to that point, but each of us has to reach that point. The Sheikh will stay with us as long as he can, but eventually we have to answer for ourselves and we have to go on for ourselves. May it become our path that we take the path of truth. May it become our path that we take the path of reality. May it become our path that we understand the nature of unity and the nature of divinity, and that we leave illusion and take divinity as our birthright and become attached to divinity, and that will take us through all eternity and provide contentment and peace to all of our beings. Ameen, ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.